Right, preparing to start the live stream. Setting up your meeting for custom streaming. And we are live.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining the Environment Subcommittee. Let me start off with talking about the order in which we're going to consider bills. First one we're going to discuss is the biggie, is BEPS HB 49. What we're going to be doing tonight is reviewing the proposed new amendments compared to the draft that we sent out last week, and we're not going to be taking any vote on the bill. Hopefully at our next meeting, which again, hopefully will be Monday afternoon at 1 o'clock or thereabouts, that's when we would do that. And then after that, we're going to be considering Delegate Morgan's House Bill 480, hopefully be able to vote that out. HB 747, we do have we have proposed amendment language. We're going to take a look at that language, at least, review it, and I'll talk about sort of the next step when we get there with respect to 747. And then you've got my House Bill 1155. Very brief bill, but nonetheless, there is an amendment to it, and we'll discuss that. Before we get started with the review of HB 49, I want to say, at last week's meeting with respect to BEPS, there were a number of advocates, and I'm sure there are a fair number of advocates who are on this call who who are very interested about BEPS and the sort of the amendments that were being discussed. And I did give anyone who was interested among the advocates the opportunity to talk for up to 2 minutes about sort of the BEPS bill as it existed back then. Tonight, we won't be doing that. However, advocates who are called on by subcommittee members would have an opportunity for feedback that way, which is sort of, the way we've always done it. So we'll be reverting back to our traditional method for advocates' feedback. So before we turn to HB 49, any questions from subcommittee members?
Oh,
Foley.
about HB 49 or just in?
Yeah, or just about the agenda.
Oh,
How we're going to
I don't
proceed.
have questions about the agenda. I have questions about HB 49.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go.
Delegate Stein, I just want to ask the group a question. There is someone named Mariah Schreiner in the waiting room. Does anyone know this person? Because she's not on my list. Okay, then I'm not going to let her in. All right.
Yes, sorry, she's with us, Sierra Club. If she's allowed to observe.
She can, but next time I really need to have the name ahead of time, please. Okay.
Yeah, please.
Thank you.
Been our
And yes, that's been
been our
standard
policy.
policy.
Yeah.
I don't let anyone in unless I know them.
Yeah.
And Delegate Lewis is now coming in. So thank you.
Okay. All right. So with HB 49, what we're going to do is, again, what was sent out were suggested new amendments. I mean, these are, in addition to, or in some cases, changing the language from the bill that was sent out last week. So I'm going to ask Kristen to go through those, and as she does, I may offer, some further explanation as to why that proposed amendment is in there. And, after we talk about each piece of language, we'll stop and see if anyone has any questions about that. Okay. Now, Delegate Foley, did you have a particular question or a more
I have a
general question?
procedural, I have a logistical question.
Okay.
Once again, I am confused about what we're reviewing here. So I have in my hand a copy of House Bill 49 that was sent out yesterday at 11:14 p.m. Is that the latest?
Kristen, is that the latest?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Then I'm good. Thank you.
Okay. Very good. All right. Well, Kristen, if you could share your screen and we will start the discussion.
Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So what I went through is I highlighted the amendment language that has changed since last week, or has been added. And so this first change relates to last week, the discussion was regarding regulations that included special provisions to account for on-site renewable energy. And this language is just further fleshed out to ensure that this would mean that it's crediting the generation of the on-site renewable energy by covered buildings toward the building's EUI targets.
All right. So a little bit more language on the idea that on-site renewable energy shall be considered with respect to the BEPS provisions, BEPS requirements. Any questions from subcommittee members about that? Okay. All right, Kristen, you want to move on to the next one?
The language here is exempting SCIFs from the energy use intensity targets. And then it goes through and describes the requirements for meeting, this exemption.
Yeah, so SCIFs, I wasn't aware of what the acronym meant, but I think it's spelled out in the language there. It's a sensitive compartmented information facility.
Mr. Chair, a SCIF is a DoD facility or a national intelligence facility that is completely enclosed where nothing goes in it. Only thing that goes is when you're inside, nothing goes out. Secure cable, there's no telephones, highly compartmentalized, secure facility.
Right, right. And as I understand it, and Delegate Morgan, you can probably confirm, these are facilities that use a lot of that have a lot of servers that use a lot of electricity. And so, the argument that SCIFs are making is that it's particularly challenging for them to meet energy use intensity requirements that would be established by MDE.
That is correct.
So okay, great. And so this amendment would exempt SCIFs from the EUI requirements, but not the direct greenhouse gas emission reduction part of BEPS. Delegate Otto.
Yeah, well, this is basically a data center, but it's a government facility. Is that what we're saying here, that we're exempting?
A SCIF is not necessarily a data facility, although in cases it could be. In other cases, it can be anything from highly classified office spaces and conference rooms all the way up to a data center. So there's a wide spectrum in defense and intelligence what these things can be or cannot be.
So, but the cloud that we locate would still be subject to the BEPS, the data centers?
That I can't answer.
You mean data centers that are not considered to be SCIFs?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Under this amendment, that's correct. It just deals with those that have this national security connection. Delegate Foley.
Okay, so that brings up another question, because last year we kind of gave data centers a pass on their generators. So you remember the PSC ruled that they couldn't have the generators. We gave them a pass on it. So how
They
does
might fall in their definition of critical infrastructure.
so that fits into this bill under critical infrastructure? Is that what you're telling me?
Well, the bill does have special provisions that account for critical infrastructure. We don't define the term here, but I know the public utilities article, I think, defines critical infrastructures, including data centers. I'd have to look into that, though.
Okay, we had a big fight over that last year, right? So, and the governor put in this bill and we went back and forth with the environmental groups. And anyway, what I'm trying to figure out is, does that figure into this? So if it's covered somewhere else, okay, but you know, we should know what we're doing here. That's all. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, I agree with Delegate Foley. If the governor's intention is to build an economic front here in Maryland, and one of those issues is data centers, I think it's really important for us to understand for the purpose of this bill, if data centers of the future are incorporated as exempt or if they are part of the game.
Okay, well, I guess, Kristen, can we look into that as to whether data centers
Sure, I'll look into that.
yeah, would be exempted in some way or another? Okay. We will get you that answer, hopefully, before our meeting on Monday. Other questions about this language here for SCIFs? Okay. All right, Kristen, if you want to move on to the next one.
The highlighted language referencing beginning in 2032, that relates to the alternative compliance payment fees or pathway fees. So it's delaying the fees to, they would begin in 2032. Right now, it would be 2030 that those would take effect.
Right, and Kristen, this applies to ACPs that are payable under the greenhouse gas reduction requirements as well as energy use intensity. Is that right?
Right, so it'll apply to what's already in current law relating to the greenhouse gas emissions, and then the language that is starting in line 9 establishes an alternative compliance pathway path or fee would allow a fee for to meet EUI, and that too would be delayed to 2032.
Okay, Delegate Otto.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. So how are we changing this? What's the compliance now, 2030?
Right, it would just push out
So we're
by
adding
2
2
years.
years to this. And does this include existing buildings or new construction or?
That's what would apply to the existing buildings.
Yeah, I mean, all buildings that are covered, under the BEPS provisions.
So how old are those buildings?
Well, any existing buildings as well as, well, actually, let's see, who from MDE is here? Is Jeremy Baker here? Or Chris Hoagland? Chris, okay. So, I mean, this kicks in if a new building is built as well, I'm assuming that these requirements would kick in as well for those, even, for a building that's built next year, in addition to buildings that exist today. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. BEPS applies to any building that meets the covered building definition, regardless of when it's built, noting that historic buildings are exempt.
Well, and we have a definition of historic building.
That's in the statute, and I think,
It would be something that would be designated as a historic building under state, federal, or local law.
So they'd have to go through the process of
Have
with
an
the
official
Historical
designation.
Society to establish that as a historic building.
yeah, I mean,
So any other building, if I got a 50-year-old building that I have to replace, it's going to come under these standards?
if it meets the size threshold,
Or pay the taxes that you're inciting in this bill?
yeah, Chris, do you want to amplify on that?
Sure, they're the covered building definition in BEPS is based on its size, with several functional exemptions. So any building that meets the covered buildings definition is subject to the standard. And then there are standards set by building type.
So my hospital that was built in different parts from 1950 to 2081 or 1981 and added more structures now would come under this.
Well, Delgado, that's later in the amendments, but there is a proposal to exempt hospitals.
All right, let's move on.
Okay. Any other questions? Delegate Foley, did you have a question?
No, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to point out before Chris from MDE spoke that it's not just historic buildings that are, it's also, there's a list, right? So,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Manufacturing is another category.
Right. Okay, Kristen, could you move to the next proposed amendment?
So the in Roman 9 IX, this is relating to the one-time waiver, and last week we went over language that would have allowed the waiver to be granted for a 5-year period of time, and this changes it to allow an owner of a covered building to request a one-time waiver for the expected average lifespan of their existing equipment.
Yeah, this was, I will say that this was a proposal from a couple different groups who said that this waiver is really meant to cover a situation where, say, a building recently has put in a new furnace or HVAC system, which is not an all-electric one and has a useful life of could be more than 5 years. And so really the length of the waiver should be tied to the expected average lifespan of that type of equipment as identified in a database that be selected by MDE. And Doug and Morgan.
Did you say that that will be defined by MDE?
Well, it's referring to a database.
Yes, and that's the lifespan of the equipment would be in a database identified as expected life. We didn't identify the database that does that, but
So someone's going to develop a database to track this with, is that correct?
No, this would be a database that exists already that has estimates for lifespan of various equipment.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Delgado.
So that would be using, thank you, Mr. Chairman. That'd be using data from public facilities and all, which I find that the lifespan is not as long as those of free enterprise that are investing their own money and maintaining their equipment.
Well, all right. Let me ask one of the representatives that's on the call to better explain this than I can. If Brian from AOBA or Ben Roush, want to chime in on this issue, please do.
I can do it. So it's Ben Roush, start there. There are established equipment life tables from several different reputable sources. There's ASHRAE, BOMA, Building Operations and Maintenance Association. Fannie Mae has one. You can keep finding them. And those are average equipment useful life. And BOMA probably has longer equipment life tables, on average, if you compare like to like equipment. And those are based on average service life and surveys over time. So there's actual data behind them. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think it does somewhat, but I know public facilities and public schools in some jurisdictions don't maintain their equipment, and then they want to build a new school. So I'm asking the question, is this going to be detrimental? How it's going to be calculated if the department's going to do it?
Got it.
Yeah, and also, I mean, Delgado, I just want to say, this language about expected average lifespan, it's replacing what was the original language saying it could be it would be a maximum of 5 years. We heard from the private sector that 5 years probably, in a lot of cases wouldn't be sufficient to take into account the fact that the equipment that may have been installed recently has a longer lifespan than just 5 years. And so it really should, the potential waiver should be longer than that and take into account what is the expected average, lifespan of that equipment. And so this was something, again, from the private sector that they were recommending. And, at least in terms of what's presented here, we thought that it made sense to consider it.
Well, I think that's appropriate, but you're going to charge them every year?
No, I mean, it's
tax them every year for that privilege to keep that operating?
no, I mean, there would be a fee to cover I mean, if a building owner wanted to request this waiver, then they would have to pay a fee to cover the cost for the department to review the plan.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions about this? Okay. Kristen, you want to move on?
As part of to apply for one of these waivers, the building owner would have to submit to the department a plan that previously was prepared. The language was prepared by an engineering consultant, I think, and we're updating terminology to refer to those trained individuals as an energy auditor.
Right. So I can provide a little bit of background for this proposal. So as Kristen said, the original requirement was that the plan had to be prepared by an engineering firm or an engineer. So the thinking is that someone doesn't necessarily have to be an engineer to have the type of background to prepare this type of plan. So we changed the name of, the sort of generic reference to an energy auditor. Now, later on, and Kristen will get to this language, we do say that the auditor needs to have, I think, license or have a professional license or credential recognized by MDE, but nonetheless, they don't have to be an engineer. So again, this was meant to be, provide a little bit more flexibility as to the type of person or type of company that could prepare this plan.
And I did scroll down to the provisions that expand on, the credentials.
By the way, Margie, Delegate Ruth is in the waiting room. Delegate Foley.
Mr. Chair, sorry, I'm not in the waiting room. I'm in Dylan's window.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, good to see you. Delegate Foley, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So these energy auditors, they're not employed, they're independent of MDE, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so there are people who actually do this for a living, and it's one of these auditors that has to sign off on this.
That's right.
Yeah,
Or
okay.
has to be prepared
Right.
by an energy auditor who's got got a license or credential recognized, by the department, as well as have gone through the training. And that's, I think, in the existing language as to what, the BEPS provisions are all about.
Okay, and it looks like the department is MDE is gonna provide training for these auditors.
Yes,
Okay, great.
that's right.
Okay, thanks.
Delgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, who's determining these qualifications? The department and the regulations?
Yes,
And,
that's the proposal. Yeah.
so I get a card from Staples with my name as energy auditor, and submit
That would not be
to
enough.
them. Yeah, well, I'd like to see the criteria that they're going to use on that before I want to support this. So thank you.
Okay. Okay. Other questions about that language? The energy auditor language. Okay, Kristen, you want to move on?
Yeah, and I'm gonna go back
I'll go
here
back,
to this
right,
to the
right.
second the waiver for economic and feasibility.
Yes.
So yes, and so there's also language that would characterize this as for if energy or an emissions reduction measure was determined to be impracticable or economically infeasible. And then later in the bill, there is a definition for impracticable to include an energy or emission reduction measure necessary to comply with BEPS would not be reasonably could not be reasonably implemented, including due to lack of existing technology.
Good Morgan.
Chris, what would that mean in English?
Basically, if there's
the technology changes all the time. So where do you sort of footprint that?
I think
Where
there's
do you
some
baseline
situations
that?
where some situations the technology just wouldn't exist.
Okay.
Um,
All right, and Kristen, remind me, this is the waiver, I mean, with the new language, with the additional language we're putting in, which could be renewed every 5 years. Is that right?
yes, and I'll go down to that paragraph where it expressly says that the waiver remains in effect for 5 years and it is renewable. So that's in paragraph 5 here.
Right, that was something that I know the department in the testimony at the hearing had said that that was their intention, that this particular waiver be available every 5 years. Wasn't in, it was accidentally omitted from the original language, so we're making that clear here. Delgado.
Yes, it says January the 1st, 2025 at $190 per metric ton of excess carbon dioxide equivalent. How is that measured?
Okay.
I can measure the temperature.
Hold on a second, Delgado. Kristen, is that the next new change?
So right,
Okay.
that is an amendment to current law that that says the department can't set an alternative compliance fee for excess greenhouse gas emissions that is less than the social cost of greenhouse gases. And what this does is that it spells out what that cost is.
So who determines the cost of the social cost of greenhouse gas emissions?
Well, under the bill, under I think the original legislation and is spelled out here, MDE sets an alternative compliance fee, and this deals with the direct greenhouse gas emissions that cannot be less. It's determined by the department, and what it's basically saying is that it cannot be less than the standard of that's in place by with the EPA as of beginning of this year, or $190. Because I guess, Kristen, remind me, that is the amount that's in place right now. Is that right?
I
At the
believe
federal level?
so.
Yeah.
per metric ton. Now, is this measured by some kind of sensor? Or are we just electronically calculating that by some algorithm?
Well, here, let's see, Chris from MDE, if you could jump in and explain how this is calculated.
Sure. Well, in terms of buildings' emissions, that is calculated based on their energy use to determine at each building how many metric tons of carbon dioxide they are producing through on-site fuel combustion. It's effectively based on how much fuel they are combusting. Then you know how much carbon dioxide they would be emitting. That's how, as the core part of the program, as buildings are assessing what their carbon dioxide emissions are. As for the social cost of greenhouse gases, I'm not sure if the question was how that is calculated, but that is.
Yeah, I'd like to know the formula on that.
So that is an estimate of if you emit 1 ton of carbon dioxide, you make climate change a little bit worse, and that has costs. The social cost of greenhouse gases is an estimate made by economists of if you were to quantify how much worse that is in dollars, social cost of greenhouse gases is an estimate of that.
Right, and tying the alternative compliance fee in this situation to the social cost of greenhouse gases, that's from the original bill from 3 years ago.
Thank you.
Sure. Delegate Foley.
Also, maybe help Delegate Otto out. If you read the beginning of that in the small type, this is something that's calculated by the EPA, by the Environmental Protection Agency. So it's not like MDE is making it up. It's there. EPA calculates that. Am I right about that, Kristen?
It's EPA, but the language does read the social cost of greenhouse gases adopted by the department or the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency.
Right.
I don't find that to be gospel, so we'll leave it at that.
Okay. All right, Kristen, you want to move on?
This language here, so a new paragraph 2, and it's intended to track categories of buildings that are listed in current law. And this would say that in calculating the statewide standards developed by MDE, the BEP standards, owner of a covered building would not consider greenhouse gas emissions or energy use. Wait, if the building, okay, so they wouldn't, I'm not sure this reads right, actually, now that I'm reading it out loud. Oh, yes. So if the commercial tenant of the covered building is a healthcare facility, laboratory, assisted living, and nursing facility, military building, critical infrastructure, or building used in life sciences. And then there's language here that would exempt the uses of a backup generator or other equipment that runs on combustible fuels if that would be required by federal, state regulation or an accrediting body in healthcare. And then it also exempts generating steam for the sterilization of instruments or equipment.
Yeah, before we get to the questions, let me just say we heard from some in the private sector, especially health hospitals, that right now the exemptions for backup generation under the regulations only apply if the requirements for use of backup generators are provided by federal or state law. But it's our understanding that, for example, in the case of a hospital, they would have a requirement for backup generation that is set by an accrediting body. So we're proposing this language to sort of broaden the situations in which backup generation is required if required by a regulation or an accrediting body. And then with respect to the generating steam for the sterilization of instruments or equipment, what we heard is that that is a very energy intensive process, and it might be difficult to meet for that activity to meet BEPS. So that's the reason why that is excluded as well. But with that, happy to take questions. Delegate Baylor. I think you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. It was actually me that
Okay.
question. So this is not exempting all healthcare facilities. It's only making these two narrow exemptions for facilities. Is that correct?
That's correct. Kristen, tell me if I'm wrong on that.
No, that's correct. It's
Okay.
if they're required to have the backup generator or they're generating steam for sterilization.
Thank
Those
you.
types of buildings.
And is MDE okay with this amendment?
I don't know.
Can I ask them?
Well, feel free to ask Chris.
Chris?
Thank you for the question. We will have to look closely just to ensure that with the ands and the ors, it would, if it's intended to only exclude the energy use associated with those particular functions, we'd be happy to look at that and ensure and provide any feedback on any tweaks that would be necessary to implement that, rather than if it's not intended to exempt the entire building.
Great. Thank you so much.
Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kristen, could you define for me what a life sciences building is?
I don't have that. I think it might be oh gosh, we had this conversation. I don't have that answer readily. We had this conversation when we first had BEPS, but I don't remember.
Okay, I guess my
I
question
think it
is,
might be research, but I'd have to look at it.
okay, where does a cannabis growing facility fit into this?
Delegate, I don't know for sure, but off the top of my head, I would say that a cannabis growing facility is not covered by this. But again, we could put that in the bucket of things that we'll research over the next couple of
Yeah,
days.
I guess my question would be, why not? Why would it not be covered, or why is it covered? Thank you.
Sure. And Kristen, these are the categories of buildings that are from the original law where we said was a
That's
special consideration.
Yeah, and I'll go back just to current law. This was included in the original law that the regulations were to include special provisions or exceptions for certain categories of and industries. And so that's in lines 19 through 22. And so we were just modeling after what was in current law and maybe further expressing what was intended a few years ago.
Yeah, and Kristen, there, line 22, it looks like there's a
Yeah.
statutory reference, so maybe
Yep.
we could,
Yep. Good
yeah,
point.
we can send that out to everyone so we know. I don't know if that just applies to buildings used in life sciences or if it's broader.
I think it's buildings used in life sciences
Okay.
is the defined term. That
Yeah.
the section 3-201 is referring to is the buildings used in life sciences.
Okay, so we can send out what that definition says are buildings used in life sciences. And specifically, Delegate Morgan, we can find out if cannabis growing facilities are included there or anywhere else. But I think probably if there's going to, that would be the one that it would be included in, I'm assuming, but we'll get that answer for you. Okay, Kristen, you want to go back to where we were? And let's see, Delegate, in the meantime, let's see, Delegate Otto.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. What's the definition of a military building?
I'll look at when I'm looking. I can. I'll look at
Is
each
that
of
all
those.
military buildings? That's the Naval Academy, that's Pax River, that's
Right.
Yeah, I would assume it's a very broad,
Fort
a
Meade.
very
it's,
broad reach. Yeah, yeah. Again, we can get clarification on that. Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if I missed it, I apologize, but can I get some more information on B, generate steam for sterilization of instruments? What kind of facility are we talking about?
I mean, we heard that this happens in hospital settings in particular.
So there's not some category of, I looked up steam sterilization, it's for infection control. And which is, I can understand what that's about, but I was wondering if there is such a thing as a standalone facility that does this, or this is part of a, some other kind of healthcare facility, an acute care hospital or a laboratory or something else, or is there some unique category of building where they're doing steam sterilization?
Sure. Is there anyone from MHA who's on the call? No. Okay.
I mean, someone could follow
Yes,
me.
Chair.
I'd just be curious.
What's
Thank
that?
you.
Delegate Stein, there is somebody.
Oh, okay. Well, if MHA wants,
Natasha was on there.
Natasha.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. Thank you, Chair. On
Sure.
behalf of hospitals, Delegate Lehman, this is used for the sterilization of our equipment. And the technology we have now won't heat up the steam to that temperature without releasing some gases. So this is necessary for hospitals. I can't speak to whether or not there's standalone facilities that generate steam for sterilization purposes, but for our purposes, we do need this for our instruments and equipment.
Okay, thank you for that. And you're saying it's part of, in particular, of Anne Arundel Medical Center or one of the other hospitals in your system, or?
All hospitals.
All hospital. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure. Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just so I'm clear with this, so what we are exempting here is one of these buildings, healthcare facility, laboratory, assisted living, or a nursing facility, military building, critical infrastructure, or a building used in life sciences. And then that building also has to meet the next two criteria. Is that correct?
One of the next two, right?
What says and?
Well,
No,
yeah, I mean,
it's
2A
and
or B.
or B, yeah. It has to meet one,
Oh,
and
okay.
it has to meet either 2A or 2B.
Either 2A or 2B, but then if that's the case, and it does, let's say a hospital, because it generates steam for sterilization of instruments. So would the whole building be exempt or just that portion? Because I heard you say just that portion, just that steam generation or whatever. What's exempt here?
Well, I guess the way this language is written, it would be the building.
The whole building. That's what I thought. Okay. Because I think that's not what someone said. And I just wanted to be clear that that's what this does. Okay.
Yeah, Kristen, is that right? I mean, we would be exempting the building in which, well, let's see, certainly for the generation of steam, but then the backup, yeah, the building in which you have this backup generation.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Delegate Lewis.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the extent that this might be helpful, I thought I would just share from personal experience, as I'm someone whose career included doing bench research. That means laboratory research on a research bench at various research institutions. And the first question was about life sciences buildings. A life science building is anywhere where biology, medical, clinical research gets done. It's very typical academic language, life science building. And the other question was about steam sterilization. In addition to steam sterilization being used routinely and in a perfectly normal everyday function in every hospital or medical clinic to remove any potential biohazards on medical equipment, steam sterilization is also used in life sciences buildings. For example, where you might be doing, bench research, experiments, using test tubes, glassware, and you might want to clean it and sterilize it in between uses. So it's really very standard. Just to share that insight, Mr. Chair, to the extent it may be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Delegate Lewis. Very helpful. Thank you. Delegate Baylor or Delegate Ruth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So now I'm confused because this doesn't seem like a narrowly tailored exemption, because it seems like it's going to exempt the whole building, following up on Delegate Foley's question. And wouldn't this basically exempt every hospital in the state, because every hospital would have to have backup generators?
Yeah.
Is it exempting the whole hospital or just the part with the backup generator? I guess that would be
well, with respect, let me, not to jump ahead, but there is proposed language that does exempt hospitals broadly, regardless of whether, this issue of backup generation or steam for the sterilization. So, but with respect, so, all right, let's take it. So putting the issue of hospitals aside for 1 second, I would interpret this to be the building in which this activity takes place, but perhaps, we could add some clarity, as opposed to, so that it's the relevant building. If it's a military building, or it's a particular building in a healthcare facility that's not a hospital, for example, that's not the entire facility that is exempted, but the building in which this activity. I'm no expert in these types of activities, but I would think it'd be hard to separate like the part of a building in which you have a backup generator located from the rest of the building. So I think it would be built, applied to a particular building.
Mr. Chair, I have serious concerns about that. And I understand the hospital's concerns. I did meet with Natasha Mayhew, and I'm sorry if I said your name wrong. And so I understand their concerns, and I could support some really narrowly tailored amendments, but I don't think we want to exempt all healthcare facilities or even all hospitals, because that's a huge amount of energy that's being used. And so I would really rather narrowly tailor than just to exempt hospitals outright.
Okay, well, we'll discuss the hospital exemption in a little bit, but I would, Delegate Ruth, if with respect to the language that we're looking at here, that's highlighted right now, if there was some amending of that language that would make it more palatable to you, I'd encourage you to work with Kristen, and that could be proposed as an amendment to this amendment. Does that sound okay? Delegate Ruth?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Delegate Lewis?
Oh, sorry, I should have lowered my hand. Thank you,
Oh,
Mr.
no
Chair.
problem. Okay. Delegate Otto?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as it is now, Bethesda Army Naval Hospital would come under this bill?
I would, off the top of my head, Delegate, I would say
Or
that's a
does
military
that come
building.
under the military exemption you're talking about? Or,
Yeah,
I got issues. They do a lot of good work and we spend a lot of money there, and we don't want to make it cost more.
I would assume that comes under the classification of a military building.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions about language that's on the screen? All right, Kristen, you want to move on to the next?
The next part of the bill is just restating what we've gone over. It's double drafting due to a termination provision of the section that's being amended in the bill. So I'm going to jump down to section 3 of the bill. which we jumped down, I think, a little earlier. And so this amendment is adding the definition section to the bill, and it is excluding from the definition of a covered building a hospitals. So currently, covered buildings do not include historic properties, schools, manufacturing buildings, agricultural buildings, and so hospitals would be added to this list of categorical exemptions.
Yeah, okay. Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Kristen. So my question, I guess, rhetorically now is marijuana agriculture.
I don't think so. I don't know.
Well,
It's regulated under a different. I don't really know, actually. I don't know. I think all of those types of categories and what they include, I think we need to look into a little more.
Thank you.
yeah, and I know a number of us have met with MHA. I mean, Natasha, not to put you on the spot, but you want to make sort of the couple key points as to, behind the argument for excluding hospitals.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So hospitals do have very unique energy needs. So we kind of went through some of those earlier with the other parts of the bill. But we also are under significant funding constraints and capital constraints. So we operate on a fixed budget system where the state sets our budget. And so our model does not include funding for additional infrastructure investments needed to meet the BEP standards. Additionally, again, as a critical infrastructure, we need to be able to continuously serve patients and make sure they're receiving the highest level of care. And so we need this exemption to ensure that we're not diverting the very limited resources we have away from providing that patient care to infrastructure and capital needs.
Okay, Delegate Otto. Delegate, you're on mute.
Well, I take it off and then it comes back. Natasha, how much is the Medicaid assessment per bed to the ratepayers of private insurance to these hospitals?
I'm sorry, Delegate. I do not have.
Don't we have a
that
bed
exact number.
assessment tax that is paid by the insurance industry or those that have health coverage and that goes to Medicaid?
Yes, the HSCRC does set all those rates.
And they set your reimbursement too, right?
Yes, all of it is set under the model structure.
So this would add additional cost to everyone that participates in the healthcare system. Am I wrong?
Well, Delegate, we're proposing, the proposed language would exclude hospitals from coverage under the bill.
I'm supporting the amendment then.
Okay. Okay. All right. Kristen, could you move on to the next one?
The amendment language added a definition for economically infeasible, and the definition that was discussed last week would have applied this as meaning covered buildings with respect to condos and co-ops. And the language here is being updated to include all multifamily residential buildings would qualify for that economically infeasible waiver when the expected payback period for an energy or emissions reduction measure is more than 10 years, accounting for incentives and avoided ACPs.
Yeah, and so the reasoning behind this proposed amendment is that apartment buildings have some of the same sort of structural issues that similar to condos and co-ops. So it makes sense, to the extent that number one there says that the payback period is more than 10 years. We're saying that apartment buildings should be added to condos and co-ops and being eligible to say that something is economically infeasible if the expected payback period for what's required is more than 10 years. So that's sort of the key part of that change, of that proposed change. Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and maybe this is in whatever amendments we have left, but I don't think so. First, before I ask my question, can I please ask not to use initials like ACP? It took me until now to figure out what that is.
Duly noted.
Alternative carbon payments. I
Yes,
think
we'll
that's
try to
what
make
that
this
means.
acronym free.
Yeah, please. Because I don't know what those terms mean sometimes. Number one. Number two, so we're on multifamily residential buildings, and some of the feedback that I have gotten, and I'm not sure how to address it, is that, Montgomery County has its own BEP standards. And my impression is they may not be as strict as what we're talking about here, but I have heard from a number of facilities, multifamily buildings, and communities that it's difficult because they've been trying to comply with the Montgomery County standards, and to now have to change that is difficult. And I just wondered if there was any way to grandfather in that so that they don't have to go through, like they're already in the process, right? So now they're going to have to start over and meet different standards. And I'm just getting feedback that it's very confusing and very difficult for some of these buildings and communities to do that.
Okay, well, Delegate, grandfathering in, saying that basically Montgomery County is the only jurisdiction that has their own sort of BEPS requirements right now. Other jurisdictions in the state may adopt them in the future. But right now it's just Montgomery County. I mean, right now it's not automatically grandfathered. There is a provision in here concerning interaction between local BEPS standards and state standards.
Where is that, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Kristen, if you could pull that up, and Chris from MDE, if you want to explain how, the language that is in here, provides for that interaction between local BEPS and the state BEPS program.
Happy to, Mr. Chair. And the bill includes a proposed mechanism whereby a county, if they adopt a BEPS, could provide a demonstration to the state that theirs is as stringent as the state's program. And if the department agrees, then all of the buildings covered by that county program would only have to comply with that county program. The county would provide a report to the department every year for which buildings are complying, and any that are not complying would then revert to the state standard. So the state standard would be a backstop, but the buildings would otherwise only have to comply with the county program.
Yeah, and let me just comment that my opinion on that is that's okay going forward. But, the Montgomery County standards, and I hate to be so Montgomery County centric, but it is affected here. The Montgomery County standards are already in effect. And so they've already been working toward those. And, so I think this does present, I'm not sure this addresses that issue.
Yeah, Chris, any response? I mean, I take it that the delegate is right that, I mean, this does not provide automatic grandfathering of buildings that are meeting Montgomery County BEP standards right now. Is that right?
Right. And if they're not meeting them now, they're in the process of, they're moving toward them, right, to meet them. And I believe, I don't remember exactly what those standards are or what the deadlines are, but they're different, I think. I think it's different. It's different standards and it's different, I believe it's different deadlines, but I could be wrong about that. So I just have heard this. I've heard this from a number of communities, and these are communities that and building owners that want to comply. I mean, I'm thinking of like Leisure World, Writer World. A lot of them are senior communities, like senior, and they're working really hard to try to comply. And now it's going to all change, and I think it presents a problem for them.
I think to the extent it's helpful, I'll suggest that I don't want to speak for the Montgomery County. I understand some representatives from Montgomery County are here. The department, we did consult with the county in crafting this.
Okay.
There are some differences in the programs. Our program does not have energy use intensity standards set yet. That is something that would come later. But back when we did propose energy use intensity standards, the county's proposed ones were more stringent in that they took effect faster, but were otherwise quite similar. I think it's the department's position that we would sort of allow the counties to sort of make their demonstration, and we'd look at the impact of the program as a whole. So there could be opportunities where even if the programs don't line up exactly one by one in terms of their regulatory provisions, if the county believes that theirs accomplishes as much as the state, then we could potentially say, yes, we agree, that's more stringent. And then all of those buildings covered by that county program would, under this provision, comply with the county.
Yeah, I think I would like to hear from Montgomery County representatives who are on this call, Mr. Chair. But I also want to say that what Chris said, I think, is a key to what I'm saying, which is that the timeline is shortened in Montgomery County, so the deadlines are earlier. So they're already into the process, and for MDE now to step in and like rip it up if it doesn't meet the requirements, I think is problematic for these communities. But that's what I'm saying,
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. And Delegate, I mean, not that I'm encouraging, additional amendments, but I mean, certainly, if there is language that you want us to consider at our next meeting.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm smart enough to do that, but.
Okay. I'm sure you're underestimating yourself, Delegate Foley, but, and did you want someone from Montgomery County to comment?
Yes, please. That would be helpful.
Okay. Whoever's on the call from the county who would like to chime in.
Sure. Yeah, this is Emily Curley, Montgomery County Department of Environmental Protection. So yeah, our BEPS regulations were just approved by County Council last week. So buildings, multifamily buildings in the county have started benchmarking and reporting to the county. So we start to have some data from them. Those buildings start to understand where they are, both in respect to site energy use intensity and direct emissions, if it comes to that. And they have to also pay attention to that at the state level. But to your point, multifamily buildings have until 2030 or 2031 to meet an interim standard, and then until 2035 or 2036 to meet their final standard. So again, in the county, we are just focused on site energy use intensity, and there are some similar kind of flexibilities that we've built in. We call it a building performance improvement plan. So some multifamily building types are also subject to a kind of 10-year or less payback test when it comes to economic and feasibility. So I'd say there's some similarities, some differences, but that's where we're at with the program.
And if I could, Mr. Chair, can I ask Emily a question?
Sure.
Okay. So Ms. Curley, if are you satisfied that the language that's in here will allow Montgomery County buildings to comply with the county standards and then also be in compliance with the state standards? I mean, they're not gonna have to start over or make some big changes. I mean, I'm glad that you're working with MDE on this. That's great. So I just want to know what you think about that.
I mean, I think we support the stringency argument, right? I don't know what other counties might come after us, and we would not support a county having less stringent than what the state has to do. So, if that would require some changes to our law to bring that up to the stringency level of the state in order for this carve out to work. I just think we would need to talk more with MDE about how to navigate that. I think the other challenge is just in the enforcement. So right now, building owners that don't meet the county would sort of default back into the state requirements. So that is maybe creating that same problem we're trying to avoid here, where, building owners in the county are having to look over their shoulder that, maybe they've come close to county compliance, but all of a sudden they're opted back into the state. So again, there could be room for counties doing this, and with the stringency of the state program, to also have the same enforcement authority or the same authority to kind of levy the same alternative compliance payments, and sort of keep everything within one jurisdiction. Because right now we'd be, passing off information between, here are the buildings not in compliance. Okay, now they have to start reporting to the state, and now MDE is responsible for enforcing on that. So, just in terms of kind of keeping everything streamlined into one program between, reporting, compliance, and enforcement, that is one change we would recommend. Is also looking at kind of what happens when buildings are not in compliance. Here at the county level, we are highly constrained in terms of the sort of enforcement authority we have. Class A violations. Recent state law increased that to $5,000, but that is our limit.
Okay, well, maybe we can talk more about it offline.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you, Delegate. Delegate Otto?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure. I think we were talking about condominiums and things that I don't know where we are in these amendments right now, but how much does this add the cost to the reserve fund that we've required these buildings and homeowners associations to deal with? I'd like some kind of numbers, and I think they're struggling now to meet the other requirements we made of them. So,
Yeah, I mean,
who's got a figure? Nobody's
I
got a
don't know if there's a
figure.
particular
I
figure,
think it's
but
not achievable. So,
well, let me just ask the advocates on the call, are there any representatives of condo associations who are on the call? Brian?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So there are some condominium associations and co-ops in Montgomery County that have elected to become members of the Apartment and Office Building Association. And while I can't answer Delegate Otto's question directly, because the buildings, they're all different and they all have different impacts, so I can't give you a specific on building by building estimate. I can tell you that we've looked at AOBA has looked at Montgomery County's benchmarking data and tried to come up with an estimate on how much BEPS would essentially cost those building owners, and it partly depends on whether they're paying the alternative compliance payments or whether they're doing some of the work. And some of the amendments that you all are considering here tonight will certainly help with easing some of those. So I don't have the most up-to-date numbers, but it will range, and I can get with our director of sustainability and try to get some additional numbers for the subcommittee ahead of Monday's meeting, if that would be helpful.
Sure, please do. I mean, I guess maybe just Delegate Otto, I mean, if there's a say for condo building, or some other multifamily building, their HVAC system will have to be replaced because it's nearing the end of its useful life, and to meet some of these BEPS requirements, it's recommended that an all-electric system be installed, which could be, have, depending on the building, maybe an increase initial costs, which would be, but hopefully the idea is that it's recouped by savings within 10 years.
I believe it
anyway.
will be quite expensive for 30-plus-year-old buildings that have to have new electric lines run and new service panels to operate these appliances, that you don't know that they can substantiate their existence. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you,
Okay, all
Mr.
right.
Chair. I think I made my point on
Sure.
this
Okay.
is going to affect these condo owners.
All right. Delegate Ruth?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so going back to Montgomery County, if I understand right, they have an EUI requirement. I wasn't quite sure if it's more stringent than the Maryland one or not, but they don't have the direct emissions requirement, which I think is very important. So I understand that, you know, there may be some difficulty, you know, with complying with one and then complying with the other, and maybe we need to look at a pathway to get to whatever is the more stringent. But I don't think we can exempt them from the direct emissions piece of it, because that's an important piece.
Well, Chris from MDE, how does that play into your assessment as to whether a local system is as local BEPS program is as stringent as the state one?
Thanks for the question. I guess that's why we pointed to the concept of stringency in this language, to give the department and the county the flexibility to look holistically at the effect of the standards. They interact with one another, energy use intensity standards and greenhouse gas standards. And so we want to make sure that demonstration that the county would provide, and then the department's determination can account for the fact that if hypothetically the county's energy use intensity standards are significantly stronger than the state's, then that could potentially balance out the difference in having one standard versus two parallel sets of standards. So I guess all I can say is that we attempted to put together a process that could consider those nuances as a whole, to ensure that the counties wouldn't have to write their regulation to look exactly like the states, but that as a whole it could accomplish the task.
Thank you. But shouldn't the county also have a direct emissions, or either county have a direct emissions standard, or that these buildings would have to comply with the state on that? Because the EUI, as I understand it, makes the building more energy efficient, but it doesn't necessarily eliminate the greenhouse gas.
That is correct. And I think, for example, our analysis showed that the inclusion of energy use intensity standards as a complement to greenhouse gas standards really significantly improved the benefits of the program. So I think we'd want to keep an open mind walking in, that there could be scenarios where an EUI-based program could potentially achieve the same stringency. But I don't contest your point that that targeted standard for GHGs would be important by itself.
Thank you.
Thank you. Delegate Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just curious, is there a reason if Montgomery County, or any county for that matter, can demonstrate that it can, meet the state standard, or go higher than the state standard, that you can't say, that you couldn't say in the bill that the bill is not attempting to preempt any county with standards that are as strong or stronger? I mean, why wouldn't you just go that route? There aren't going to be many counties, in my experience, that have the, resources and the expertise that Montgomery does. I would guess it's probably the only one, but I mean that would be Delegate Foley or somebody from Montgomery obviously making that case, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Chris, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the language we have in here is sort of the functional equivalent of that. Kristen,
You mean where MDE would be certifying that the
that the county, if the county standards are at least as stringent as the statewide BEPS program, then buildings in that county don't have to comply with statewide BEPS.
Right. More stringent standards aren't precluded.
Right.
Right. The department could certify a program that was more stringent than the state program.
But then I would think you would want actual preemption language, unless I'm missing it. I don't see anything about preemption, to make it really clear. You know, so there's no ambiguity. If it were my county, that's what I would be pushing for. It just occurred to me. Thank you.
Yeah, well, Dr. Lehman, maybe get with Kristen and see if there's some way to, express that concept better than.
Yeah, I would support Delegate Foley on that, but again, it's her county. I would look to her to, engage her county leadership and make the case for that if they think there is a case to be made.
Okay, Delegate Foley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to respond to Delegate Lehman, I appreciate that, and also Delegate Ruth. My point here was, there is language in the bill that allows MDE to work with the counties, and in fact, Chris and Emily from Montgomery County have both said, Chris from MDE and Emily from Montgomery County have both said that they have been working together on this. So I'm assuming there's some, I'm not assuming, I know that there's some coordination. My concern is more for the good actors who have been trying to comply with Montgomery County regulations that are already in effect. And I don't want them to be penalized. I guess that's the way I want to put it. It's not the county I'm worried about, because the county will, you heard Emily say she's willing to be more strict if she has to be, right? But what I am concerned about is buildings that have been prepared, been working under the assumption of the Montgomery County rules, because those are the only ones they've seen, and then have to be, then they get penalized because they're not following the state. So I'm going to talk to Emily offline. Let me see if I can figure it out. And then, I may come back with something.
Okay. All right. Very good. So Kristen, I think there's the bottom of the screen, there's that one remaining change, that proposed language.
I think there's two.
Actually two of them. I'm sorry.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And we actually did already talk about anyway. So in new I, we discussed last week, and it's a definition for energy or emissions reduction measure. And this language is including connections to a district energy system that would reduce the building's energy use or greenhouse gas emissions at the lowest practical costs.
Right. And this did come up last week. And okay, any questions about that item? Delegate Otto.
Yes, Mr. Chair. What is a district? I need some perspective here.
Okay. Chris at MDE or John Fiastro was on the call.
The connection
Could either of
to
you
a
explain what a district
energy
energy system is?
And it's defined in law. District energy.
I don't believe John is on the call right now, Delegate Stein.
Okay. Chris from MDE.
Sure, thank you. Happy to. Yeah, district energy system is it is defined in the law, and it's effectively when a potentially large group of buildings are all served by a single energy system. There is the downtown steam loop in Baltimore is a good example here, where the company that Mr. Fiastro represents provides steam to many different buildings in Baltimore from a central plant. That is a district energy system.
So they're being exempted here, or what are we?
When there's a connection made to one of those systems, that would be included as one of the energy or emissions reduction measures.
I have a Berlin Utilities is in my district, that generates electricity, municipal generation. Does that affect them, or would it help them, or is that considered a district energy system?
Is that well, actually, I guess I don't know what
Yeah, do they generate
it
thermal
is.
energy? I don't know.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't generate thermal energy. It's they generate electricity.
District energy is defined as thermal energy generated at one or more central facilities that produce hot water, steam, or chilled water that then flows through a network of insulated underground pipes to provide hot water, space heating, air conditioning, or chilled water to nearby buildings.
Okay, no electricity involved here, huh?
Well, I guess, Kristen, you're saying that the definition refers to thermal energy?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And then we have the definition of impracticable, which I guess Kristen did reference earlier.
Right. When we were discussing the economic infeasibility waiver, language was to add, economic infeasibility or impracticability. And this is intended to illustrate what would be considered impracticable. So these would be measures that could not be reasonably implemented, including due to lack of existing technology.
Okay, and that is the last change. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you to the subcommittee's patience in reviewing these. I guess there are a couple questions in terms of whether something counts. Like, for example, Delegate Morgan's question as to whether a cannabis growing facility would fall under any of the exemptions or special considerations here. There was another one which I'm forgetting right now, but yeah, so there are a couple clarifying questions that will get an answer to folks before Monday's meeting. And the goal is at Monday's meeting to be able to move amendments. And I will say, if anyone, again, not that I'm encouraging it, but if anyone wants to tweak any of the language, get with Kristen, and what we're looking for is actual language, as opposed to concepts or not liking this or that. So if there are any changes to what is in this document as presented tonight, get the language to Kristen so we can consider it Monday. Okay, thank you. Well, we're done with one bill. I don't think the other three will be nearly as time consuming, but Kristen, could you talk about House Bill 480?
House Bill 480 is a local St. Mary's County bill relating to county water and sewer plans. It's repealing requirements and restrictions related to additional local review that must occur before St. Mary's County is authorized to adopt, revise, or amend its county water and sewer plan with respect to provisions in the county plan related to new or expanded public sewage systems and water supply systems.
Okay, Delegate Morgan?
Yeah, very quickly, that is not a Todd Morgan bill. That is a St. Mary's County bill to make it a lot easier for everybody's purposes.
Apologies,
It probably
right.
needs an amendment, Kristen, to make it, take my name off and put St. Mary's County delegation on.
Move the amendment.
Okay. All right. So the amendment is to make this as a delegation bill. You're saying, Delegate Morgan?
That's correct, sir.
Okay. All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the bill as amended.
Moving
Move the
motion.
bill.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of the bill as amended, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, bill passes as amended. House Bill 747. And let me just start by saying this was something that, I think we discussed it last week. There was some amendment language that was going back and forth that wasn't, at least it wasn't finalized. It might have been finalized for consideration, at least maybe, a couple hours before the subcommittee meeting. So I said, let's wait until this meeting to review the amendment language. And I think we have Well, Kristen, I'll let you explain sort of where we are. We have a technical amendment, and then we have some suggested language from Delegate Guyton's office that's not an official sort of sponsored amendment by Delegate Guyton. So first, I'm sorry, Kristen.
Oh, I didn't mean to talk over you. I just was going to ask, did you want to bring up
Yes,
Delegate
please.
Guyton's first amendment? I just handed out the amendment language and not a reprint because it basically stands on its own, and it's relating to the on-site wastewater regulatory board and the I'm going to try to bring it up here, but the sponsors submitted an amendment that would. Oh, actually, I did do a reprint. Hold on. Let me share this. So it's extending a termination date and implementation dates related to the State Board of On-Site Wastewater Professionals. They just needed a little more time to set that up. And so that's just amending chapter law chapter 419 of 2022. And so
Right.
it would extend those dates by 2 years.
Okay. Any question about this particular amendment? Which again is, in the grand scheme of things, sort of a technical amendment. Okay. Then Kristen, could you bring up the other language that was sent over to us? Okay, so okay. Well, maybe just want to sort of generally review what the
Sure.
proposed language is.
The stakeholders were discussing the issue of basically add an additional step once these inspections are done in either the rental or property transfer setting. And this is to address instances where the inspection identifies a failing system. It would require the owner of the property to notify the local health department or other relative agency of the failing system and when the system is fixed.
Okay.
So the same language is added to both the sections in the bill that are being included. So that would be the required to report that information of a failing system. And then the other amendment would exempt provide certain exemptions for the property transfer requirements, and that would be if it involved the transfer of residential real property is between current spouses, a parent and a child, or full siblings where the property is held in a trust, the property's mortgage is being refinanced, or the change in ownership or form of ownership does not involve the introduction of new parties. And so long as there has been an inspection of the system within the previous 5 years, within a 5-year. And then special uncodified languages being added that the bill may not be interpreted to limit a mortgage company or financial institution from requiring an inspection as part of contract terms for the sale or transfer of property.
Okay. Well, thank you, Kristen. So again, this is language that Delegate Guyton's office forwarded to the subcommittee saying it could very well be worthy of our consideration. It's not in the form of an actual amendment from Delegate Guyton's office. So my question to the subcommittee is this. Is there anyone, if anyone feels comfortable moving as an amendment, any of this language, we could conceivably discuss that tonight. The alternative is for folks to take a close look at this language and decide at our Monday meeting if, in addition to the technical amendment, which we discussed, if anyone wants to move any part of this language. So, Delegate Lehman.
I'm willing to move these amendments, Mr. Chair.
Okay, all the amendments.
Second.
I'm concerned. I want to read these amendments.
Okay. Well, all right. So how about this? We will hold the bill so that Delegate Otto and realize, these were just sent out recently, so folks have not had a chance to review them fully. It sounds like, so Delegate Lehman has moved them. Delegate Ruth, it sounds like you're seconding them, right?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so what we'll do is at our meeting on Monday, we'll start from that posture, where the amendments have been moved and seconded, but we'll have a chance to debate them and decide whether to incorporate them, as well as the technical amendment that Kristen reviewed at our Monday meeting. Everyone okay with that?
I'm fine. Do you need me to take back the motion, Mr. Chair?
No, it's fine.
No,
I mean,
leave it in that posture. That's
Yeah.
fine with me. I
Yeah.
mean, I think I'll like the amendments, but I haven't had a chance to review them, so.
Okay. Okay, that's fair. I mean, to provide more time for review of them. So that's what we'll do. We'll pick up this bill on Monday as well in this posture where the amendments have been moved and seconded, and we'll consider them as a package. And there's also the technical amendment, which we'll consider that as well. Okay, last bill. There was a sponsor problem with it, HB 1145. But so Kristen, could you explain what this bill, which has a definition, what it does and what the amendment would do?
Sure. The bill is defining the term ecological restoration, and the amendment is taking out language that would have required the department to update its regulations to include or incorporate the definition of ecological restoration. And so what is left is the definition. Ecological restoration means an activity undertaken with the goal of recovering, reestablishing, or enhancing a degraded, damaged, or destroyed ecosystem through improvements to physical, chemical, or biological characteristics or processes, returning natural or historical functions or services, or protecting or improving resiliency. And this definition is based on a recommendation of where they characterize as a work group that was working with MDE. Let me see if I have that reference, but
The permitting work group?
it was the Ecological Restoration Permanent Study report that was put out last summer.
Right, and that was done in response to a bill we passed, I think, in 2022.
Correct.
Okay, Delegate Foley.
Move the amendments, Mr. Chair.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All right, but I do see Delegate Ruth, did you have a question?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering why we removed the regulation and is this actually going to do anything if the department doesn't do any regulations based on it?
Yeah, I mean, Kristen, could you go to the bottom of page or the rest of page 2? I think there was concern about the language says the department shall update any relevant regulation adopted under this article and is appropriate. So I think there was concern about what would be the time and expense associated with DNR doing that broad of an update. It still would have an impact on permitting, ensure consistency across agencies. So as it's a fair question, and as the sponsor, I did have that question, but I think it still has value even without that section.
So the department could update any regulations that they think were important to update.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions about the amendment? All right, all those in favor. Thank you. Okay, all those in favor of the amendment say aye.
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 Opposed? Bill as amended. Is there a motion?
Move the bill as amended.
Second.
Thank you. All right, all those in favor of the bill as amended say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, bill as amended passes. Thank you. Well, I think we accomplished, we reviewed 3 bills in about 15 minutes. So we definitely, we're more efficient than compared to the review of the first bill, which admittedly is much more complicated. But all right, well, that ends the agenda for tonight. And as you know, and thanks for everyone who got back to me about Monday, it looks like we're going to have a meeting Monday at 1 o'clock. I mean, please pencil that in on your calendars. Once we get confirmation, probably tomorrow, then we'll send out a meeting invite. And certainly, I mean, there will be other things on the agenda. Certainly, the 2 that'll definitely be on is, hopefully final consideration of HB 49 and HB 747. Okay. Well, with that, motion to adjourn.
Move.
Okay.
Thank you.